So, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, welcome back to the Emotional Balance Sheet podcast. It's been a few years.
Yeah, and man, it's like I should have just booked a catch-up call. I'm sorry, listeners. You might hear us just going back and forth to hear how the world has treated us. It's so cool to see, you look back after a few years that have passed and you're like, wow, time really does is really the greatest indicator of helping us evolve, right, and grow. And if we are on a specific path, we tend to get a lot further than we were.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And it seems like I've been having more of these conversations where we're talking about like pre and post COVID, but now we're almost, well, I guess we're 4 years beyond the March 2020 catastrophe of when everything shut down. And it's still, I think there's still like some heightened awareness of that, but especially like within the financial space that I work within from a financial planning and a portfolio management piece, there's a clear delineation between post and pre-COVID, and we're still trying to grapple with a lot of the data that we're seeing, from the economy of how things aren't still necessarily like back to normal, and trends and things that we were looking at before COVID aren't the same post COVID. So it's been really interesting these last few years. And you know as well as anybody, the market does what it does, and it's even, I think, more heightened this year with a political election that's very heated, and will continue to, I think, get more heated as we get closer to November 4th or 5th, whenever the election is.
Yeah, I'm be very interested in your perspective because I was talking to someone the other day and they're like, I feel like everyone's forgotten about COVID. And then I have clients that own businesses and I have clients that maybe have been impacted professionally from it or still trying to survive new based on like new customer behaviors and such. And I don't think those people haven't forgotten about it, but some people are making the most of it. Like some people are saying, okay, how do I make money now in this climate? Because there's always a way to make money. And some people are kind of blaming it. And two very different situations
Yes.
and outcomes.
Yeah, I work with businesses that are still being impacted. What's interesting about that is that, the without getting too wonky, because this is not what we want to talk about, but the with interest rates being as high as they are, they have really handcuffed a few of the businesses that I work with, as opposed to the majority of people I work with on the family office side. They're loving these higher interest rates because, you look in a high yield savings account making, 5% these days, where, before COVID, when interest rates were pretty much close to zero, you weren't making anything. So on one hand, I have people that want interest rates to come down. On the other hand, I have people that want interest rates to stay higher. So it's always a tale of two cities. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more that depending on how your mindset, and this is why I'm really interested to have this conversation with you again with your new book, is that, you talk about mindsets a lot. And on this podcast for now almost 4 years, we've talked about mindsets and being aware. And so I'm really interested to pick your brain and dive into the new book that you've written called Fearless on some of these topics.
Yeah, becoming fearless. And I'm not sure if you had the new subtitle or not, but we wanted to be a little bit more specific about what the book entails. And it's 65 strategies to journey from self-doubt to self-mastery. Really focuses on leading with a growth and solution-oriented mindset that's intentional and aligned to your values. And generally, it's just saying, are you willing to look at your current situation and believe that you have the responsibility and are empowered to do something about it? And it's like those CEOs that are working in a business and interest rates are going up, and all of a sudden their money printer kind of dried up. Were they watching expenses? Were they seeking new opportunities to increase wealth? Were they investing in customer satisfaction and experience to build loyalty? Like it's how are you acting in your current environment to make the most of it to lead you towards your goals instead of are you kind of maybe not aware of it or are you blaming it and kind of just sitting in your negativity because there's something about fear and negativity that are just that are constant, and that it's if you decide to focus on them, they magnify, they multiply, and then you end up getting stuck. And we've seen this even, you can even talk about burnout, which is really just living in a negative emotion for a prolonged period of time without reprieve. The same thing can happen with fear. If you live in fear for a prolonged period of time without reprieve, all of a sudden your entire life is surrounded by and is defined as fear and something to be afraid of.
So that's an interesting point because one of the things that I started doing probably a year and a half ago, and I think I'm finally like realizing some of the benefits of it now, is like when I start my day, I write three things that I'm grateful for. And so I try to get into that right mindset early in the day to where I'm not necessarily sabotaged by everything else going on in that day, potentially like the fear or anxiety. That, to your point, if that's your focus, that's when it's going to get magnified, as opposed if you're focused on I know we're going to talk about like growth mindset, but if you're focused on what's good, that internal locus of control that you can actually make an impact on, that gets magnified.
I was actually just talking to a client this morning because a lot of what I do in the career and leadership space has some component of mindset to it that you've alluded to already. And we kind of work on reframing beliefs. It's basically saying, I believe this thing, so I have this feeling, I label it with a thought, and then that thought becomes a belief that I have. And we tend to operate with negative beliefs. So we tend to say that, like, hey, um, self-destructive child that's within me telling me that I'm terrible, I believe you. We tend to focus on those thoughts and we make them into who we are, our defining core beliefs. And this client was kind of like, Ben, I get the reframing thing. I understand. Take something negative, make it a positive, say it out loud, but I'm having a hard time believing it. I go, that's normal. That's totally fine because you've been living now for however many years, believing the negative thing, reinforcing it, focusing on it. So inside, just imagine inside your little brain, you have someone with a megaphone. That's like your inner critic shouting all the terrible things to you that are holding you back. Well, you need to give the microphone to the champion. You need to at least give him a voice for a little bit. You don't have to believe him yet, but you have to give him a voice to try to change like the scale, the where from I'm only focusing on the inner critic to now I'm focusing on a little bit more of the inner champion. And as the inner champion starts talking, and you give that inner champion a little bit more of a voice, and you start reinforcing it, you'll start to potentially start listening a little bit more. And as you start listening a little bit more, you'll hear something and say, you know what, that's true because, and then you'll reinforce it with some sort of evidence. So all of a sudden now, you have both of these voices in your head kind of yelling. And if you decide to focus more on the inner champion, eventually that champion will become stronger and bigger and louder. And you can also think of it as you've been living your life with these negative beliefs, and they've built these kind of raging rivers and channels in your brain. Because every time you have a belief, you're kind of walking on this path, and that path gets deeper and deeper and deeper and gets filled in with a raging river. As you start building the new belief, you're walking on a brand new path. And it's going to take just as long to build that channel and that river. But if you're consistent, it's going to be built. And eventually, the inner critic, if you stop focusing on it and stop listening to it as much, it's going to dry up. And that water is going to go down that new channel. But it just takes a lot of time. And sadly, people that don't have a coach or don't have positive reinforcement or put themselves in an environment that's negative end up not being able to dry up that channel.
So I think that's a really great example because I read about reframing, I have conversations about reframing, and there's I don't think that what I struggle with is how do you actually do it? And I think to your point is it's not something that happens overnight. Like the example you just gave, like you've been dealing with these negative emotions or mindset or negative focus for, a long period of time. Why do you necessarily believe that you're going to be able to, snap your fingers and it's going to change overnight?
100%. And let's just take a specific example. It doesn't have to be anything crazy big because the things we're talking about are simple. Like the book, And one of the things, it's like engage in meetings. You want to increase your visibility and get promoted in an organization? Speak up. Like act a position above you. Act as if you've already been promoted. There's really simple things, but generally the types of clients I work with hold themselves back from doing them. And specifically, it's generally because they're afraid of maybe being judged, afraid of stepping out of their specific role. So they have strong beliefs on like the hierarchy within an organization. They're afraid they're gonna say something silly or stupid. They're afraid maybe they'll get more work, whatever it is. So you have this fear that if I speak up, XYZ is going to happen. And that's the negative belief. Man, let's just use the fear of judgment. I'm going to speak up. It's going to be wrong. I'm going to get, my position's going to be in jeopardy, and maybe I'll get fired. That's a belief that people tend to have. So you have to look at that and say, okay, how do we reframe that belief? Well, if I speak up, uh, I will be heard. My people will see that I understand a lot more than maybe they think that I do. Or if I speak up, it will create a positive conversation. Or if I speak up, the role of my leader is to be curious and to help me grow. So it's going to create opportunities for that and learning opportunities potentially in an organization. So you go down this path, you pick whatever positive belief you want, and now you have that, you reinforce that, you speak that out loud to yourself. But then in the meeting, you do something a little bit, you do take one little action to test it. So in a meeting that you with someone that you trust, you speak up, you say something maybe that you would hold back, and then you reinforces that, okay, I'm safe here. Then in a meeting with that person is in that meeting with somebody else maybe in that meeting, you speak up again. So you're in a kind of a little bit more of a riskier situation, and then you start building trust. Or maybe you even tell your friend that you're like, hey, I want to speak up more in a meeting. When I speak up, can you support what I say? And can we have a really positive dialogue? I want to get people more engaged. And so you're slowly and surely reinforcing this new belief so that it becomes your new reality. And then all of a sudden now you're speaking up in a huge public venue where you actually didn't feel safe initially, but because you trust yourself.
That's interesting is that the what I took away from that is like to continue trying new things. I know throughout the book you talk about being curious, and I think that's one of the an underappreciated underappreciated aspect of being successful is that most successful people that I know are very curious, and it's almost like a drive to figure out um you know what's what's new, what's challenging, what other opportunities are out there. Again, it goes back to this, kind of growth mindset. One of the interesting things I found when I was going through your book is that how you have it broken down into like three main segments, and it's personal, professional, and career. And I'd like to have you explain or have your understanding of like how you ended up choosing those three um bigger aspects of the book, and then you dive deeper into specific topics under those three major headlines, if you will.
Yeah, and it's under personal and professional. So we did kind of two splits from this is your personal life, this is your professional life. And then under personal, we have mindset, success, relationships, and purpose. And then in professional, we have job satisfaction, leadership presence, and career growth. And initially, so what's kind of like talk about the source of this book. I currently have, it's been running for like 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years, Fearless Fridays. It's a podcast segment. Every Friday it comes out and it's on the Live Fearlessly podcast. And it's a 2 to 3 minute episode of something you should do in your life to live fearless. And I received a lot of positive feedback about that podcast. It created a lot of really strong engagement, more so than any interview I've ever done. And I thought to myself, okay, so there's something here. And if I think about who I serve as a leader, it's all about self leadership, being empowered, feeling accountable. It's about living fearlessly. It's about being fearless. What if I took that content and made it into a book? And so I took all those episodes, transcribed them, I looked at them, I categorized them, and I went, okay, what's most important here? Like what actually aligns with living fearlessly in your life? And came up with these categories. And when you think about one, just overall life, personal, professional, they are split no matter what anyone says. It would
Right.
be great if they aligned with each other, if they fed each other. I would love for that to be the case for every single person in the world. But there's things that help us be more successful in our personal life and our professional life, and there is some crossover. But so that's why there's that split. In our personal life, I think if you just were curious, like if you just had your mindset be more positive, growth oriented, solution focused, redefined what success was, like all these big things that we talk about. If you could just do that, probably you wouldn't care about anything else. You'd be set. And so that's why mindset is first. And then generally I work with high achieving leaders, professionals, they want to succeed, but the way that they're approaching success is not serving them. And so that's why we have a section on success in the book. And then relationships, because you can't, I mean, honestly, the only true currency in life are the relationships that we have. So they're incredibly valuable. And then purpose, because generally fulfillment, this idea of meaning, this concept of like I need to do more to create the life I want can hold us back too, and at least just be a lot of weight and stress. And so that's why when I think about our personal life, I'm like, okay, relationships, achievement, like growth, our mindset, which is our foundation, and purpose, which is supposedly what like a lot of this personal development work is working for and towards, and at least it mattered a lot to me, encompasses that kind of segment. And I'll pause, but and then I'll go kind of into the professional explanation.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of overlap between how you've laid this out and the work that you do with the work that I do as a financial advisor. Because over the last, I'd say 3, 4, 5 years even, like I've I've made a major conscious shift to get people focused on not just their financial life, but their emotional life too. And at the top of that is helping people to identify their purpose with their supporting objectives and then taking action, creating, you know, action items are the byproduct of gaps that we see that allow people to um, achieve their objectives, which supports their purpose. That's I think a lot of times over the last 4 years of having this show and having people like you on it, Ben, is it kind of reinforces that people need to take the time to slow down to think about these things. And I think that, a book like yours is a great tool to allow people to do just that.
Curiosity and slowing down. Take one thing away. Take a look at your week and guard some. And it's so simple. Everyone's like, I've heard this advice before. Well, how many people have done it? Go guard some time. I actually just did this 2 days ago. I don't know if you do this, Paul. Like, I went to my calendar because I was feeling a little overwhelmed the past week. I'm like, oh man, I let this get away from me. I know what I can do. And I just went into my calendar up to the end of the year and I set massive blocks. And I'm just like, this is my time. Nobody can book it. I can book something on it if I want, but I want to be able to go to a co-working space if I want to. I want to be able to take 2 hours in the morning to take some more time at the gym. And I let that go for a little bit. I let the calendar get busy. And so instead of being like, oh, I'm so busy, I don't know what to do, and being stressed, take an action. Look at your calendar and say, great, I can do this for a week. And then now I have control again.
Yeah, no, I actually learned that like years ago from reading Cal Newport's work on time blocking, and I get that question a lot. I'm like, well, why can't I book a meeting with you on a Monday or a Friday? Like, are you taking like really long weekends? I'm like, no, not necessarily, but there's specific things that I found that I need to do as part of my business that it it fits me better to do some of those things on say a Monday versus on a Friday, I block that time to be able to think about what I need to be doing to help support the families that I work with. Um, Give myself time to be able to research things that I'm curious about, not only for myself personally, but for the families I help to support. So I couldn't agree with you more. Like I think giving it sounds so it sounds so easy, and it seems so simple to do, but when you start when you first take that first step in that action, it's a little scary, it's a little nerve-wracking because you're like, well, what if I miss out on, you know talking to somebody or a meeting or somebody gets upset. And I think I've been doing this for almost a year now, and no one's gotten upset with me yet.
I don't have one client ever in my experience of being a coach that when I brought up time blocking didn't respond with I can't, I have too many meetings. And the conversation ends up going something like, okay, what would happen if you didn't go to one of those meetings? Well, nothing. Okay. Well, let's pick that meeting and get it off your calendar and block that time. But then they say, well, what if someone wants to meet with me at that time? Go, well, this is the purpose of time blocking. So it's like people are held back by their fear of disappointing people, fear of missing out on information, as you said, fear of judgment from others if they don't show up. Basically, just fear of potentially having a negative impact on their position or their brand within an organization. But work is always going to be there. That's actually one of the entries in the book. That meeting, if you don't have it this week, is this going to happen next week? Or it might not be that important, and or they're going to have it without you, and everything's going to be okay because they don't truly need you there. Our, yeah, we have more control over our time than we generally think, and so I love that you've been doing it. I love that you have the Monday, you said Monday, Friday, no meeting rule.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's
That's
still,
powerful.
there's still times that come up where it's like, okay, I need or want to take this meeting on a Monday or a Friday. It's not, there's, that's the thing with this. It's like you want to have guardrails, but you also still want to have some flexibility too. Um, so yeah, let's pivot into the professional side, because I do have, I think you just touched on it, but I want to dive a little bit deeper on one of the chapters under job satisfaction. But walk us through the professional side like you did on the personal side.
Yeah, so professional, first off, I want people to be happy at work. So job satisfaction is first. And one of the main areas of research when I was completing my doctorate was in job crafting, which takes a look at our actual work, social relationships, and meaning behind our work. And so, what really is at the core of us being happy? Then talk about leadership presence, because a big part of what I talk about with clients and work with them on is that you don't have to have the title of a leader to be a leader. Leaders inspire followers. A title is just a position in an organization. So, how do you lead without that title, which then leads into career growth? Because if you are that leader, then that generally leads to opportunities. And so, if we want to grow in our career and create opportunities for ourselves, how do we do that? And and so hopefully that encompasses right what people are truly trying to achieve within their career overall, and just helps them improve their day to day.
So one of the chapters that you have that I wanted to have you talk a little bit more in depth on is this concept of never have too much work to do. Can you can you expand on that a little bit, and where you were, what point you were trying to get across with that?
Yeah, have you ever said that? By the way, I can't. I have too much work to do.
Yeah, on a lot of different occasions. Not I try. I hopefully I don't say it as much now, being the business owner, financial advisor at TAMMA, than I did when I had my you know corporate career going. But ironically, I hear that from from people I talk to often, and sometimes too often from my own wife, Teresa.
So a lot of these little strategies came from like real moments in my life where I was doing something and the concept would pop into my head and it would help me. And so I wrote it down and I did a video on it. And this concept really was solidified was I went to a friend's house and it was like, I don't know, 6 p.m. It was a weekday and I had some projects that were pending. And he like there was probably like 8 of us there. He was walking over to the kitchen, opening up a cabinet. He's like, how's it going? And I just had work on the mind, work in my head. And I was like, you know what? Everything's going really well. There's a lot of things I'd like to work on right now, but I'm not home, so I can't work on them. So I'm going to have some fun. And it hit me that it's like, oh, yeah, when you're doing anything that isn't work, work should not take up any of your energy or time or focus, because then you're still working on it, but you're not actually doing anything productive. And so this concept was like, how do we let go of the stress related to work when we can't do anything about it? Because if we can't, then we are basically giving our jobs, which are jobs, more of our time than they truly deserve, and it's not actually doing anything about it. So hopefully someone's listening and they're like, yeah, I'm worrying about that project or that meeting later today, but I'm not in that meeting. So it's okay. Take a break. Unless you're actually going to do some work to prepare for it. Let's focus on what's in front of you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. It's one of the things that I've tried over the last year, is having especially with working from home, is having an opening or opening time slot to my day and a closing time slot to my day. So when I start my day, there's 4 or 5 things that I do to get my day going, including, like, as I mentioned earlier, like writing 3 things that I'm grateful for. And then on the flip side, and I actually got this uh, idea or concept from Matt Reiner, who I worked with last year, um, is to have, and I think this is really key, because I have, well, now soon to be 14-year-old triplets and a 12-year-old, to have a closing part of my day to where I can get comfortable with wrapping things up. And when I walk out the door and back upstairs, I kind of have to flip a switch where I'm like, okay, I'm putting work away and now I'm focused on my kids and Teresa and, all the organized chaos that comes from, having, triplets plus one. And I think that's still been like the hardest transition for me to make, is that end of the day when I go from work to um uh personal, or if you will, because there's always, it's really easy to just walk back down into my office and fire up the laptop, or bring the laptop upstairs with me and sit down and work on something. And so again, it's these things are easier said than done, but I think what I found is that I'm not great at it now, but I'm a whole lot better at it than I was a year ago. And so giving myself some grace and empathy is probably one of my biggest challenges with that.
And that's what we have to do. We have to say, I'm a constant state of improvement and being grateful for the moments that you are present and understanding the moments that you maybe feel a little bit more pulled towards that work is important. The kind of rituals that we used to have with going into work and leaving work. I don't know if you remember, but I never was able to take my computer home. Like I went into an office and I had a computer and that computer stayed in that office.
Right.
And there were security measures where that computer got locked into a desk and I could not do anything while I was home. Now it's in our pockets. And if people do have an issue with work, and generally what we'll do sometimes if it's really extreme, we delete all the work functions from a phone. And so we make it so like you have your work computer, that's the thing that you work on. When you're not on that computer, you cannot work. And your organization cannot say anything about that, especially if you're not in a senior executive position. And even in, I believe, in other countries, because we're speaking from the United States right now, they don't allow companies. Did you see the law in Europe? They can't email after the workday. They legally cannot send an email or communication after the close of the workday. And so we have to do that for ourselves. We have to set our own traditions, our own rituals of going into work. So that means not checking your email on your phone when you wake up or when you're having your cup of coffee. It means waiting until you open up your computer. And it means not checking that email once you close for the day. I actually had a client and he wanted to be more present. So what we did is we did this visualization of like closing the door on work, like leaving work. And so we got him a little door ornament. You can buy these little like Christmas door ornaments that actually open and close. And we had him close the door when he would leave work for the day. because he needed to create his own tradition and event to help him feel like he was ending work.
Yeah, I that makes complete sense. I couldn't agree with you more. It's talking about like trying to remember like before, like pre-COVID, post-COVID time frame, like the time period where there weren't laptops, there weren't, well, back in that day, Blackberries, now like iPhones or Androids or whatever, where you weren't carrying your work around with you. And I've experimented with deleting like email off of my phone, and I kind of have this love-hate relationship with it. I go back and forth, but um I can generally catch myself when I'm checking it too much. Like I've deleted social media off my phone, which has been a godsend. But I it's and again, I think what we've talked about here is being able to get over that fear of missing something because it's still going to be there tomorrow. Like last I checked, although I really love what I do, and I'm sure that the families I work with really appreciate, me being available and being on. I'm not performing, like heart surgery. Like I'm not like necessarily like saving somebody's life right now. Maybe in future years, but today not so much.
Yeah, one of the entries in the book also talks about how we define work. And I got a little bit of like people didn't agree as I was like, doing some beta readers and stuff, and people did some, and the people that generally didn't agree were very attached to their jobs. And work is supposed to give us meaning. Great. It's supposed to help us feel like we're doing something more important. Now, some people don't have that gift. So sometimes work is actually just supposed to pay the bills. But no matter what your reason for working is, or how you've aligned it to your sense of fulfillment or self, would you work if you didn't have to? In the same exact way that you're doing now. And I would challenge any person if they said yes. Because I think if money stops being a factor and every other aspect of our life gets the same level of importance, then you probably would do some of the things you're doing now that you enjoy 100%. Like if maybe you're doing construction, you probably would build some stuff, you probably do some projects, you probably help out your neighbors. As a coach, I would mentor, I would go talk to people and stuff. Nowhere near. Would I care about branding? Would I care about having a global brand? No. I'd have conversations with interesting people, but nowhere near as I do it now. And so if we remember that like we work because we're getting paid or because we have career goals, why give it more of our time if we're not getting paid more?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Like, because I've I've been lucky that I've had this interesting journey where the first half of my career, if you will, I was in corporate America. And now for the last, 10 years, I've been or 10 plus years, I've been a business owner, an entrepreneur. And those two worlds couldn't have been any different. But there's a lot that I take from that old world of being in corporate America because why? Most of my families that I work with all are living in that world. So it's interesting that you point that out because when I talk about and try to get people to identify and develop their own purpose, like their I'm hoping that their career is not going to be like, the top of that Mount Rushmore, if you will.
Well, sadly, we're not really taught that, or we don't, let me rephrase that. We don't live in a society that generally invests more time into things other than our career. Our career is the most important. It should be fulfilling. It takes most of our time, depending on how we operate towards it. So we're left with the weekends and some evenings and maybe some vacations. It's difficult to find another purpose. Like when you meet someone and they have a hobby, you're just like, where, how do you, where does that, how do you have time for that? You're like, that is amazing. But we should all have hobbies, shouldn't we? When we think about it, we should all have other interests outside of our professional career.
Yeah, I'm unfortunately one of those, like, I guess my hobby today is reading because and chasing my kids. That's about the extent of it. Um, hey, I know I only
And
have you
this,
for
we're
oh,
chatting,
go ahead.
connecting with others, helping other people grow, creating an impact. It's this can also be seen as something that is it's investment of your time and energy, and it's leaving its mark on the world.
I know I only have you for a finite period of time. So one of the questions I wanted to get to, and we'll post links to how you can pre-order um Ben's book Fearless on Amazon. But I think my last question I wanted to ask Ben or talk about was from the book, what action items, one or two, would you want or see people being able to take away to be able to implement in their life right away from reading it?
Okay, I'm just gonna randomly flip to the book and then share one of the action items. Okay, so the book's called Becoming Fearless, and I just flipped to a page in the job satisfaction, the professional portion of the book. And the title of this is Take Pride in Your Work. And when I was working in healthcare, I was pretty resentful towards my employer. I blamed them for the situation I was in, and I showed up trying not to work. And it was one of the worst mistakes I made in my career because by believing that I was a victim of my employer and that I wasn't in the right place, I gave up the opportunity to make it right. So the entry, take pride in your work, really just highlights like if you are in a job and you have that check the box mentality towards work, you are creating a negative environment for yourself and you're never going to be happy. So the one thing that you need to do is show up and do one thing a day that you feel proud of at your job. No matter if you feel that you're underutilized or it's not right to you, you have to give yourself a reason to care about the work, and you can. And if you start doing that, not only will you positively impact your career, you might form some greater relationships, but you yourself will feel better on a day-to-day basis. So you can do that immediately.
Wow, that is incredibly valuable. That is really, really insightful.
And now we're going to, okay, so I pulled another one, and these are randomly, these are, but these are random. I'm in the personal section under success, and this entry is about investing in yourself. And so very often we feel comfortable spending money on tangible things like the newest phone, dinner at a restaurant, movie tickets, clothes, but we feel uncomfortable investing on intangible things like our own career growth. And you might have wanted something more tangible than this, but like you're listening to a free podcast right now. That's investing your time. That's totally great. It's amazing that you're doing that. Pick an area in your life that you want to grow and get better in, and take 20 bucks and say, how do I spend 20 bucks to grow in this area? So maybe you find a book, maybe it's a donation to an expert, maybe it's maybe it's in a free webinar, maybe whatever it is, invest something tangibly in the skill that you're trying to learn. If you do that, there's a switch that will kind of change in your brain that says, instead of this being something I want to grow in, it's something that I'm investing in. And we treat those things very, very differently in our mind. And you will find that you will become more intentional and create greater outcomes in your growth.
That's interesting that you picked that one because I just had a conversation about when does a cost stop being an expense and become an investment. And so I think you nailed the head on that one. Um, so so as we wrap up, where can people find your work the most easily or the best place for should we send people to?
Yeah. So you can always just go to Amazon. It's going to be an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Audiobook will be everywhere audiobooks are distributed across the world, everywhere that ebooks are distributed across the world. I say Amazon just because it's usually the easiest for people to go to, but we're going to be on every platform. You can pre-order on Amazon right now the ebook. You can pre-order the Audible version as well, an audiobook, and I think there'll probably be pre-order on some of the other sites as well that are available. The book's called Becoming Fearless by Dr. Benjamin Ritter. And you can even jump on an email list if you want to hear about some special events that we're hosting at liveforyourselfconsulting.com/becoming fearless. If anyone's in Austin, Texas or nearby, September 17th, we're throwing a pretty big bash. So it's free. A ton of awesome sponsors that are joining up, and everyone's invited.
That's awesome. I've actually have yet to get to Austin. I've never been there. Um, so I'll have to put that down to be able to get down there at some point just to meet up. As we were talking before we hit record, it's been an awesome experience to have these virtual meetings, but sometimes just actually being able to meet people face to face is a pretty cool experience too.
Come on down. I'd love to actually chat and in person. And to anyone listening, any opportunity you get to create something in person with someone and to even just shake a hand or to see someone face to face, it does create a stronger relationship.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, Ben, can't thank you enough for your time today. I hope, or I know the book's going to be a huge success, and we'll try not to make it another 2 years between conversations.
That would be lovely. I really appreciate you having me on. And hopefully next time in Austin.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Ben.